Get a sense of how it's affecting businesses. There is a direct correlation between the messaging from the government and the numbers that we're seeing every day. You'll be well aware yesterday that number of daily COVID infections recorded in the UK hit a new record, more than 88,000.
Let's talk to epidemiologist Mike Tildesley about all of this now. Mike, morning to you. What do you make of this number?
Well, I mean, obviously, just looking at the number, purely at the number, is concerning because it is going up. Now, as you've just been saying, I mean, of course, one of the problems is that, as you quite rightly say, as messaging goes out that there's a concern, what we start to see testing going up. And actually, if you look at the testing rates over the last week, it's gone up quite significantly, which will contribute to part of the reason why we have seen large numbers of cases over the last couple of days. Now, of course, that's not the only reason, and it is a concern. The Omicron variant is growing very rapidly. It's doubling every few days. So that is a worry. But of course, alongside the cases, we do need to keep one eye on hospital admissions and the number of people who sadly die from the disease. Both of those are still relatively low, but of course we might expect those to go up over the coming weeks.
OK, and what kind of numbers, because we're saying these are the highest daily recorded cases, during the pandemic, what kind of numbers do you think we should be expecting, considering how Omicron is spreading?
Well, that's really challenging to tell. And the reason that is difficult is because at some point, of course, I mean, what we are reporting at the moment is you're getting a doubling of the number of Omicron cases every couple of days, every 2 to 3 days. Now, of course, that can't go on indefinitely. At some point, you start to see that slowing down, partly because, of course, it's swept through the population, and partly, of course, because the booster vaccination campaign starts to take effect. I would suspect we will see that figure go up over the coming days, but exactly how high we expect that to reach, I think only time will tell. But as I say, part of that is as a result of increased testing, so we do need to bear that in mind.
Mike, when it comes to worrying about this number, because we could, as you've made very clear, for the next few days, we could report record numbers, yeah? When it comes to reporting, how worried should we be? What is different now? Is it simply that more of us are vaccinated, double vaccinated, and more of us are boosted?
Well, obviously that needs to be put into context. I mean, if I take this to an extreme, of course, if you're reporting 100,000 cases a day and no one gets sick, no one goes to hospital and no one dies, then of course the 100,000 cases per day has that much less meaning. But of course, if those cases start to go up and then a couple of weeks later you start to see hospital admissions and deaths rise up accordingly, then that is much more worrying. The situation we're in at the moment, of course, is we know with the Omicron variant that vaccines are less effective, particularly after only 2 doses. But after booster doses, we are starting to get evidence that actually that does increase the effectiveness of the vaccines quite significantly. So alongside the grim news of the 80, 90,000 cases per day, we have been seeing record number of boosters rolling out into arms. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, when they start to take an effect, start to build up immunity again, we might start to see this tailing off a little bit.
Mike, well, as the Omicron variant becomes more dominant, does that mean that the Delta and Alpha variant will eventually just disappear?
Well, this is where it's very complicated, because at the moment there is a sense that actually the Delta wave is still going on and they're sort of almost coexisting, as it were. In the longer term, if Omicron is more transmissible, and of course all the evidence says that it is, then what you would expect is it would sort of outcompete the Delta variant, as it were, and it's not like the Delta variant would all of a sudden be eradicated in a few weeks, but you would start to see that the vast majority of infections would be Omicron. We saw this with Delta, of course, that Alpha was dominant at the start of the year, and then gradually Delta started to displace it. It takes a certain amount of time, but in the longer term, that's what will happen. So we're not quite there yet, but of course we have seen a growing number of Omicron cases emerging over the last few weeks.
Mike, it's always good talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time again. Mike Tildesley, the epidemiologist, joining us on the programme.